A couple weeks back, I found this book. It's the original trade from 1991, Hulk Round Zero. This features the last 8 issues that Todd McFarlane did on the Hulk run in the 80s before moving on to Spider-Man, and then eventually moving on to his own Spider-Man book, and then eventually forming Image. And I was reading comics in the late 80s, but I really wasn't reading that many. I was really into school, college, was just taking all my time. And also, for some reason, I never read any McFarlane. I only started reading McFarlane when he came out with his own Spider-Man title that they gave him to keep him happy because he was going to leave. So I never read this. I never read The Amazing Spider-Man. And I will say this: Todd McFarlane is a great comic book artist for superheroes. His writing, I think, is really bad. I just don't think the stories are readable. So I saw this and I thought, well, let me see if back in the day, if he could actually do proper storytelling, if he had a writer with him that could, he could work with. And this was written by Peter David, who I think is probably one of the most consistent writers Marvel has had over the last 30 plus years. He's had a lot of great runs. If you're a Star Trek fan, especially the original season, he did about 21 issues of that for DC back in the early 90s, 90, 91, 92, I believe, or around that time. Those books are good, and they're actually written well. The characters sound like the characters you would expect them to sound like in a good episode of Star Trek. So I figured, okay, let me see if Peter David can work with this guy. And I have to say, I don't normally review big two books because I'm just kind of over them. And a lot of times you go back and you read some of this stuff, and I'm not a victim of nostalgia. If it's bad, it's bad. And I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, but I really loved this when I was 14 or when I was 20. But now it's just, ugh. But this is actually not bad. The whole premise is that the Hulk with Rick Jones and Clay Quartermain have realized that the U.S. military has been stockpiling gamma bombs, so they steal this van. It's like an A-team kind of van, and they're gonna go across the country and look for the gamma bombs so they can destroy them, and then at the same time let people know what the government's doing. So this is that kind of cover with Wolverine and the Hulk, and so that's kind of the premise is kind of hokey, but I do like it because it's that gray Hulk where he's not Banner and he's not the dumb green Hulk. Obviously you put the X-Men in a comic because it's going to boost sales, and there's a lot of exposition of what's going on, but overall, I guess, it's editorially mandated, but overall, the stories aren't that bad. The art is still pretty good. I can see why people really were excited about this because this was really different for the late 80s. This wasn't the old school stuff. It wasn't John Byrne. It wasn't Kirby. This wasn't Ditko. This wasn't Cockrum. This was something different, but it fit the superhero ethos perfectly. And the stories aren't bad either because it's not your typical, good guy, bad guy thing. I mean, the Hulk and Wolverine kind of fight, but at the end of the day, it's sort of they even kind of realize it's pointless, almost kind of meta. The second issue features Man-Bull, but Man-Bull actually just is tired of the suffering that he's doing. He wants to stop being, and he's asking the Hulk to kill him because he doesn't want to be the Man-Bull anymore. Then there's just other stories. The leader is the villain in the background. And I love this leader, not the one with the big flat top, but one with the cranium sticking out. I love that look. So I read this and it actually kept my interest. David is good. Peter David is good as far as not making things too exposition-y like, Stan Lee or Roy Thomas or Chris Claremont would do, just put me to sleep in the middle of a comic. And it gave a lot of the people, even the characters that you wouldn't think were that major, a motivation that made sense. Surprisingly enough, I thought it was pretty decent, especially for late 80s. The art, I can see where it appealed to people, and I can see where they would give this to Spider-Man, because at the time, Spider-Man really wasn't doing well. They gave it to McFarlane and Dave Michelinie, and the two of them were able to get the sales boosted up high. And that it was kind of interesting because That's where his art got its final form, but that was also where he started resenting Marvel because in an interview he said that when him and Michelle got the book, but it became the hottest book Marvel had, everybody wanted to stick their nose into it and tell them what they should be doing and how to and what they should do and trying to take credit. And he, at that point, when he was finishing with Spider-Man, he said, "Hey, listen, I want to leave. I want to do my own stuff." And Marvel gave him that Spider-Man book for himself, and then eventually formed Image. The thing is like a lot of artists that are good early on, there's a difference between being an artist and a cartoonist. A cartoonist can write and plot and draw all well. McFarlane is a comic book artist. We've read, and if you've read any of his old issues of Spawn or even those Spider-Man books that he wrote, they're bad. I mean, they look great, but they're bad. And I think with Spider-Man is when his ego kind of got out of control, or maybe it was always there, and then, you know, it would allow him to get out of control. But if you see this for cheap, or, you know, if you have Marvel Unlimited, or, you know, as part of one of those big essential collections, whatever, this is not bad. Better than I thought it would be. And as much as I diss on old Marvel and DC comics, I will give credit where it's due. Peter David was able to get a good, workable story, especially for the late 80s, and McFarlane's art was fresh. And it doesn't, I mean, you can tell that it's from a period from before, but it doesn't look like really dated, if that makes sense. So I like this. Who knew?